Ave Maria in the Afternoon is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. Welcome to Ave Maria in the Afternoon, examining the world through the lens of faith from the heart of the Church to help us navigate the culture. Here's Dr. Marcus Peter.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for joining us on this hour of Ave Maria in the Afternoon. I'm Marcus Peter. Last weekend, I did a commentary on the issue of the flooding in Texas. We have seen, since the breaking of this news, a tremendous amount of response on behalf of the Church. The Church has become the pillar and, frankly, the bulwark of compassion and Christ-like love amidst this otherwise tragic darkness. Countless tears are being shed in the Texas Hill Country, some unspeakable grief. But the reality of the Church's response has offered a space for healing, consolation, support, and growth. And so we want to talk about some of these stories of grief and gratitude as Catholics are mobilizing to help after this deadly Texas flood. And it's unfortunate that there are some people who are relishing in the flood that has taken place, and they're utilizing it as a platform for ideological comparison. This isn't the time for that, nor is this the place for that. This is a space for human beings to rise up to Christ's call of compassion and service. For those who are truly most needy right now, those who have suffered loss, we are called to be there for them in this very unique expression of Christian charity. So we speak with our friend Doug Keck of EWTN about this. We go on from there to speak with Dr. Matthew Bunson. Now, Dr. Matthew Bunson is the author of Saint Kateri, Lily of the Mohawks. This was the last book he co-authored with his mother, Margaret Bunson. And this is a great book because what Matthew and Margaret do is they don't just present the story of Kateri and her theological journey, her spiritual journey. They also attempt to provide a kind of cultural overview of the background that she grew up in and the black robes and their role in evangelizing that area of the world, despite most of the Native Americans being disdained by the developed world, especially including the Protestant world. And then finally, we speak with David Deavel about facing the future with hard heads and soft hearts, because in his classic Screwtape letter, C.S. Lewis and his fictional demon says it's better for people to be fixated on the earthly future. David Deavel cautions us that if we soften our hearts before the Lord, then the better way forward is hope in God and to make sure that our intellects are unmoved by lies. All this after the headlines.
Thanks, Marcus. Good afternoon, everyone. This is your Ave Maria Radio News for Monday, July 14th. It's the feast of St. Kateri Tekakwitha. Today's news is brought to you by Ave Maria University. Your vocation location is at avemaria.edu. President Trump announcing a new deal to sell top-of-the-line weaponry to NATO, meant for distribution in Ukraine.
Billions of dollars worth of military equipment is going to be purchased from the United States, going to NATO, etc. And that's going to be quickly distributed to the battlefield.
Trump is also ramping up the pressure on Russia to reach a peace deal in Ukraine. At the White House, he said he'll place tariffs up to 100% on Russia if there's no truce in 50 days. Officials in Arizona say a raging wildfire destroyed the Grand Canyon Lodge and dozens of other historic buildings at the park's scenic North Rim.
We took off and it was immediate relief that we were going to be saved.
Hiker Jamie Coffin says she was airlifted to safety. The Dragon Bravo fire has burned 5,000 acres since lightning started the flames on Independence Day. Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs is calling for an investigation into the wildfire that completely destroyed the Grand Canyon Lodge that originally opened in 1937. A nursing home fire in Fall River, Massachusetts has left at least 9 people dead. A mass casualty event was called soon after as arriving crews found people hanging from windows of the Gabriel House assisted living facility screaming for help last night.
It's a terrible tragedy for the family and the residents, and the fire department, the police, DMS, everybody did a 5-star job doing their best they could to rescue as many people.
Nearly half a dozen firefighters were reported to be among the injured. And the Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to resume layoffs at the Department of Education. U.S. Secretary of Education Linda McMahon.
This lifts the handcuffs off of what we've been trying to do, which really is to get education back to the states.
The court ruled 6-3 to lift a lower court's order that reinstated employees let go in mass layoffs. All three liberal judges dissented and said the ruling is indefensible. From your AveMariaRadio.net news desk, I'm Steve Clark.
Good afternoon, welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. We're joined by our friend Doug Keck of EWTN. This week, we are blessed to talk about the story of Catholics mobilizing and rising up to meet the need of charity amidst these deadly floods that have hit Texas. Doug, thank you for joining us. How are you?
It's always great to be with you. Thank you so much, Marcus.
I want to ask your meditation, your spiritual insight into the devastation of the flood, and what are some of the spiritual lessons we can learn from observing this?
Well, you're asking a lot of me, that's for sure. I'm not as spiritual and as educated as you are. So, you know what? I think with these things, that we always end up with the same situation, which so many people come to is, how could this happen?
Right.
Not only as children, but in many cases, children at what would amount to being Catholic and Christian camps. So here are these people trying to live their lives as Christians and faithful, and young children just beginning their lives, and other people as well. I mean, you're talking about 130 plus dead and 100 plus still missing. I don't know if those numbers have changed at all, but in that ballpark. And, and in some places, that hill country is a little bit like Eden in Texas because it's really different. It's not the kind of big concrete. It is actually a place with, it's up because of the elevation. It's a little cooler. It's got trees, but unfortunately, it's the kind of thing where because of the way the river is fed, it can overflow very quickly. And I think most people try to figure out, well, how could God let this happen? One of those questions we always have. And then the other part, legitimately, is how could we let it happen? Because clearly, this has happened before, not to this degree, but 20-something years ago, I think in the late 90s, there was a case like this, and there's been another case earlier than that. And there had been lots of discussions, I guess, about sirens and other prevention that could be taken into account and were decided not to do because of their expense. And now we've paid for that with the loss of all of these wonderful people's lives. So, when we're starting to blame God, we also have to look at ourselves first.
Yeah. And in fact, reading this, but also listening to you, Doug, I want to ask if you could also comment on how a tragedy like this helps the Christian community think about the fragility of life and the reality of death.
Well, absolutely. I think that's the you think about that Air India flight that just happened a couple of weeks ago, and they're still finally figured out kind of what happened. But, you go up in there and suddenly you're gone. You have that shooting that just happened in Kentucky. Two of those people who were killed and several shot were outside a church situation. So any of us have to be prepared to meet our Lord today.
Right.
That's why we don't need to be worried about the future. Our Lord says the future's got enough to worry about. Can't do anything about the past. All you can do is take whatever you're doing right now and make the best of yourself that you can be. And start again. And that's what you need to focus on. And that's where people get caught up in these kinds of situations where they can't get out from their past, and at the same time they're struggling with these things that they are afraid of in the future.
Even as you're sharing this, Doug, you've seen on social media how some people are just weaponizing the narrative now to criticize especially Texas government. And then just based on this article, too, do you have some wisdom or insight to help ground these poor sentiments? Doug, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, did you hear the question?
Could you repeat it again?
Oh, sure thing.
Because I started to answer it, but then it sounded like it cut out.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the question was, based on this article, but also listening to you, and you're aware of what's going on social media, people are weaponizing this to a political narrative. Do you have some words and insights to help quell those poor sentiments?
Well, I think that's the typical fallen nature of man, is that we look at anything that we think justifies our own position, and if we can use this as a hammer against our enemy, we will. And there's people, worried about whether they were seeding the clouds on one side, on the other side, that some of the people who were let go, in theory, from government positions, they would have forecasted the weather, etc. It seems to be all of that is not true, but people use that because it's self-serving, and you have to stop yourself and think, are you really using this tragedy in the lives of these people to score political points?
Yeah.
When this is life and death. Politics is a game, okay? It can get pretty nasty, but it's still a game. This is people's lives, when it comes to you meeting your maker, he's not really going to be that interested in how many votes you got for one particular candidate or not, or even what you got passed in some ways. But, how you lived your life, and did you care about your neighbor? And I think the thing about this that allows Catholics to really look at each other is, and I think which is really important, is we need as Catholics to rely on the Catholic Church and Catholic parishes and Catholic real organizations with Catholic money to be the ones who go and do these things, and not expecting some organizations, some of whom have very nice Catholic names, that are funded by the government to do a lot of these things, and think, oh, gee, aren't we Catholics nice? When the vast majority of the money isn't coming from us. And these people, unfortunately, many times are hamstrung in that they have to dilute the faith or have no faith at all in how they do things, which is what makes the church the perfect one to do it, is because it's an outgrowth of love. What did the Romans see? What was the thing? How they loved one another. Yeah. That's even what the reports for those complaining about in the early days of what was going on, the cannibal Christians. But they loved each other. They cared about each other. They looked after each other. And that's what's important. That's what we have to do. That's why the diocese is having fundraising things that are all really good. But we need to really be relying on ourselves. If we really believe that Catholics are supposed to be charitable and caring, charity isn't asking the government to take care of things and give money to poor people. Charity is you taking your money out of your amount of money, not your excess. Hopefully that's great, but even something that might mean you end up with less, and offering that to somebody else who has even less. Right. And I'm saying, I'm talking to myself at the same time here. I'm not preaching like I'm good at it. It's something I have to challenge myself with every day. But I think we all do, and we have to remember that, it's really our responsibility on a grassroots level as Catholics to do these things. And we want to support Catholic organizations, but we also want to make sure those organizations are Catholic, and that when they're out there helping people, that they understand we're doing it because we are Catholic. Yeah.
Doug, we have just under a minute and a half now, but you also bring up a crucial point that I'd like you to speak to, which is Catholics have started to think that charity is the work of the government and welfare is the work of the government. Just share with us why that's a fallacy, that we can't hold that position.
Right, exactly. Well, because, that's taking money from everybody else. I think you should be helping these people. Well, that's very good. So the government should take money from everybody else and decide to help them. That's a good thing. But what is that for you? What have you given up for doing? Have you donated more money in your taxes to say, I'm going to earmark this money for this particular thing? And I think what it is that we really have to take direct action on our own. Find charities and organizations, grassroots organizations that work close to the ground with low overhead and work on things where they bring their Catholic faith with them. They wear that on their sleeve, because our goal is to help people's body. But what's more important, our Lord said, the body or the soul? Which one is the one you got to worry about getting killed?
Right. And that's as good a context as any. Doug, I want to say thank you very much for making the time to speak with us.
Anytime, you know that.
My guest has been Doug Keck, and we've been talking about how Catholics have been mobilizing in response to the tremendous tragedy of the Texas floods. And as we round off this segment, Doug's exhortation is so crucial. Welfare is not the work of the federal government. Charity is the work of local churches. And so let's mobilize at the level of our local churches so that we can provide solutions that are most befitting those who are locally suffering. And we meet those needs in the heart of Christ in a way that a bureaucratic institution can never. Been talking with Doug Keck of EWTN. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at avemaria.com. That's avemaria.com.
Ave Maria School of Law is the Roman Catholic law school in the United States. Consistently ranked in the Princeton Review as one of the best and most conservative law schools, as well as pre-law's most devout law school. Ave Maria School of Law provides a traditional legal education while emphasizing how the law intersects with the Catholic intellectual tradition and natural law philosophy. Ave Maria School of Law, unabashedly Catholic, consistently excellent. For more information, visit avemarialaw.edu.
Hello, Steve Ray here from Footprints of God Pilgrimages. Want to celebrate some amazing anniversaries this year in France? We'll visit Normandy Beach to celebrate our heroic military for the 80th anniversary of D-Day. Also, the 100th anniversary of the canonization of St. Therese of Lisieux. Join us this October for our Saints and Shrines of France and a visit to the newly renovated Notre Dame Cathedral.
Find the Ave Maria Radio travel tab at avemariaradio.net.
Hi, I'm Father Chris Alar of the Marian Fathers of the Immaculate Conception. My new book, Understanding the Sacraments, unpacks the extraordinary gifts unique to the Catholic Church. Ever wonder why we baptize infants? Is confession in the Bible? And must wives be subordinate to their husbands? The answers to these more hot-button questions about the sacraments are on sale now from Marian Press at shopmercy.org. God bless you.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. Blessed Feast Day of Saint Kateri Tekakwitha. Joining us to talk about this wondrous young saint is Dr. Matthew Bunson. He and Margaret authored a book entitled Saint Kateri, Lily of the Mohawks, published by Our Sunday Visitor. And Matthew, I'm really glad you're joining us. Dr. Matthew Bunson is Vice President, Editorial Director of EWTN News. How are you, Matthew?
I'm very well, and this was one of my favorite feast days. Another one, of course, was for Damien DeBooster, my late mom, and I also had an opportunity to write a biography. The work that we did for Kateri, however, was especially meaningful for two reasons. One, it was the last book that my mother and I were able to work on before her passing in 2012, and I was given the great privilege of attending Kateri's canonization in October of 2012. And it's similar to Damien DeBooster at his canonization in 2009, where you felt as though you were going to the graduation of a longtime family friend. And that's pretty much what it was like to be in Rome. It's also very memorable because it was Benedict XVI's last canonization before his resignation from the papacy. So a lot of things were happening that will always stay with me.
Given all of those clearly very emotional touch points in your life, I imagine that's a memory you're never going to forget. And given that, I want to ask you to. So this book, it's a brilliant piece wherein you begin by addressing the historical context. 17th century Iroquois world, political and cultural landscapes that you touch on. Just paint that picture for those of us who don't know enough about Saint Kateri.
Yeah, well, it's really interesting. I appreciate that you want to talk about that because we have this saint who died at the age of 24. She was a Christian, a Catholic, basically for 4 years before her death, and yet she is honored as one of the great saints of North America and one of the great saints in the history of the Church. And yet her life also has as its backdrop these colossal events in North America, where you had empires vying for supremacy of the French and the English and even the Dutch. You had the great struggles of Protestant England fighting Catholic France. And then you had, in the midst of all of this, the massive missionary enterprise of the Jesuits, and all the other great missionaries who came to North America, but in particular the Black Robes,
Right.
whose legacy, whose history we honor with the title of the North American Martyrs, Jean de Brebeuf and Isaac Jogues and others, who transformed the wilderness. And the one thing to bear in mind, and I say this in particular because they are the ones who encountered Kateri Tekakwitha and helped bring her into the faith. The Black Robes, those who went to North America, we think of missionaries as people that the church sent out to convert whole regions of the world as though they were just sort of expendable.
Yeah.
And yet, the Black Robes who went were some of the best and brightest in the church at the time in the 16th and 17th century. They had doctorates in canon law and theology and philosophy, and they were geniuses and they were saints, because that is how important they felt evangelizing and bringing souls to Christ in the wilderness of North America was.
Yeah.
They sent the best they had.
And that actually paints a real picture of the stark difference between how Catholicism has viewed the enterprise of evangelization versus virtually every other religion in the history of anthropology. And so I know that's a really broad concept, but would you mind addressing that theme in light of those 4 powerful years in Kateri's life?
Yeah, well, part of it is this understanding that the souls that they were encountering in the New World were precious, and that they deserved the very best that we could send. Why? Because the message that we wanted to bring to the New World, and I count the whole of the Spanish Empire, but in particular, because we're talking about it here in North America, the work of the Black Robes, of the Jesuits, they saw the immense dignity of the Native American peoples, of indigenous peoples here, and they wanted to not just introduce them to Christianity, but to introduce them to authentic Christianity, to help them have a true and valid and authentic encounter with the person of Jesus Christ. And that's what they did. And you can see the influence of the French missionaries you have in Kateri's mother. She was the daughter of a Mohawk chief. Kateri was, and Kahenta, she was an Algonquin woman who had been baptized, a Catholic, and educated by the French missionaries in Trois-Rivières in Canada, what is now Canada, so near Montreal. And that tie right there is something that left a great mark on Kateri as she was growing up. But her real encounter at the age of 11 with members of the Society of Jesus transformed her life. It changed it completely. And what the Jesuits soon discovered as they met this young Mohawk girl, whose name, by the way, Tekakwitha, meant she who bumps into things, because she was not just considered sort of clumsy, but in fact her vision was damaged because of smallpox that left her with very difficult vision. And obviously impaired eyesight and these deep facial scars. But what they found in her as she developed this love for the Christian faith, this love for Jesus, was somebody who very rapidly advanced in her understanding of the faith. But it took the combination of this deepening faith on the part of Kateri to look for and find these graces, but then also to have in these Jesuit missionaries priests who understood what they had, who recognized the depth of the faith, and in many ways they did so many of the other Native Americans who converted to Catholicism, to Christianity. So it was this perfect meeting of authentic Catholicism with authentic spirituality, and it produced someone who justifiably has the title of Lily of the Mohawks.
You know, considering her and Isaac Jogues and their background and the fact that their lives become a testimony of, Weigel says it's the testimony of the continuity of the blood of Isaac Jogues and the baptismal water of Kateri, icons of Christ's suffering, sowing seeds in native soil. And I'd like to invite you to comment on that in light of the kind of cultural evangelization that the Black Robes engaged in.
It was an understanding of the depth, the richness of the culture that they encountered. They weren't there, contrary to what we often hear, to impose a Christian faith or to perpetrate, as we so often hear today, genocide. Quite the opposite. In fact, they had such an abiding respect for these cultures that classic phrase of grace building on nature. We have seen this as a hallmark of the great evangelists of the enculturation, but also, again, we have to go back to the authenticity of what they were preaching and teaching. And they understood the language. They learned it. They were able to speak it, to write it, in exactly the same way that we saw in the great tradition of Francis Xavier and his work in Asia and the work of the Jesuits in Asia, where they mastered the languages. They simply didn't develop an appreciation for the culture, but even the nuances of it. And that gave them this heightened appreciation. But it also then made them very much targets for not just the wars that were taking place, as we were just talking, between these empires of France and England, but also great targets for the toxic, violent anti-Catholicism of the era, which was then encouraged among the allies of the English, which led, of course, to the great suffering, the deaths of so many of the Black Robes.
And as we consider that, we have about 30 seconds left, Matthew. I want to say thank you. And I wish we had more time to talk about why we ought to appreciate Kateri Tekakwitha's heritage. But thank you very much for making the time to speak with us about her.
Well, great to be with you, and Kateri, pray for us.
St. Kateri, Lily of the Mohawks is the title of the book that Matthew worked on with his mother, Margaret Bunson. And it's published by Our Sunday Visitor. It's a labor of love of his, and it actually is a profound exploration in the life of this wondrous saint. Do procure a copy of it. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
You like pizza? Me too. And for that, we can thank our friend, Tom Monahan. First, he starts with $900 and opens one pizza shop. Then it's worldwide, thousands of shops. But all this was just a warm-up for his greatest achievement yet. He built a university.
God inspired Tom to build up generations of men and women who have a hunger to reach the world for Christ. This place is Ave Maria University.
Visit avemaria.edu to see what's next.
Underwritten in part by the following nonprofit.
Are you paying high prices with a traditional health insurance company that pays for things that violate your conscience? There's an alternative available. Solidarity HealthShare is a community of faithful individuals and families that never share into immoral medical services, all while saving you money with prices starting as low as $85 per month for singles and $512 for families. Never fund another abortion with your healthcare dollars. Call 844-313-4999 to learn more.
The wisdom of Mother Angelica.
Have you ever been so grief-stricken and so heart-sick that you can't see God? You can't see God in the tragedy. You can't see God in that cross. You can't see God in that sin. Why? You're enveloped in that grief. You're enveloped in fear. And God is out the window. You don't see Him standing right next to you.
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866-AVE-MARIA or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Christ is the answer, with Father John Riccardo.
John 14. This is Jesus in the upper room with the disciples before he's going out to his sacrifice of himself for our salvation. And Philip says to the Lord, "Show us the Father, and we'll be satisfied." Jesus looks at Philip and says, "Philip, have I been with you all this time? Don't you understand? When you see me, you're looking at the Father." In fact, only two people throughout human history have given rise to the question, not who is he, but what is he? The two people are Buddha and Jesus. Buddha's answer was, don't come to me, don't look to me, look to my doctrine, look to what I teach. Jesus' answer was, come to me. all you who are weary and heavy laden, and take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble of heart. Jesus is explicitly claiming to be God.
Dr. Ray Guarendi.
He's not on drugs. Parents will come into my office and describe a litany of trouble about this long. Then they'll say this: I'm giving you the wrong impression. Overall, he's a pretty good kid. How so? Well, he's not on drugs or anything like that. One of the new moral high bars out there, he's not on drugs. You want to raise a child not with the absence of pathology, but with the presence of virtue. She's miserable with me, but she treats everybody else great. Again, not the absence of bad behavior, but the presence of good behavior. He's not on drugs? It's a rationale. May provide some comfort. It's not a path to virtue.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. How do you approach the future? In his classic Screwtape letter, C.S. Lewis's fictional demon says it is better for people to be fixated on the earthly future. From the demonic perspective, a focus on the future best draws human attention away from present reality and ultimately our eternal destiny. God, Screwtape says, wants humans to refrain from giving the future their hearts. We talk more about it with David Deavel. David is the Associate Professor of Theology at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas, and also a senior contributor at The Imaginative Conservative. The paperback edition of Solzhenitsyn in the American Culture, The Russian Soul in the West, edited with Jessica Hooton Wilson, is now available in paperback. David, great to speak with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on, Marcus.
It's great to speak with you again, always. So, first off, what can we learn possibly from Screwtape? I mean, it's a demon. Do we want to trust anything he says?
Yeah, I think we can learn from Lewis's fictional demon because Lewis was trying to get into the mind of what would be the answer given as to how to keep us away from God. And so I think Lewis's imagination was correct, and his demon is correct about what God wants of us, which is not to give our hearts to the future because we don't really know what that is. Right. And this fits with the Gospels, right? I mean, think not for the morrow. Don't take that into account. Just do what you want to be known for today, which is following God in the here and now.
David, given that we are living in such a post-Christian era, and therefore just the notion of a Christian worldview seems to be absent from its hold in the culture. One would argue that society tells you, have this, you prescribe this, you describe this Pollyanna view of the future. But the truth is, I think the average human person, especially here in the West, has a tremendously bleak outlook on the future.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, and I think there's reason for that. There are reasons to not be tremendously optimistic about the surface of things. The Pew study that was done this past year that showed that the church is still hemorrhaging, 8 people for every 1 person who comes in. And we know that many of our dioceses are shrinking in terms of the number of priests and the number of parishes dramatically. I think there's no doubt that there's no longer a kind of bonus that's given to somebody for being a faithful Catholic in public life. In many ways, it's a detriment to advancing. So these things, I think, can make us think kind of bleakly about the future of the church. But that's not the whole story, and it's not something that we should become down about, because in many ways, God is often working most effectively when there's a kind of silence and even an ominous silence.
Right. And that's why when you look at the Screw Tape Letters, one of the things you see the demons do so masterfully as they talk about it is to get us away from, first of all, any capacity of silence, but second of all, to not be in the present and therefore lose sight of an eternal worldview.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, one of the funny things about, for those of us who've prayed many, many Hail Marys, one of the funny things about it is that, the end of it, pray for us now and at the hour of our death. Obviously the hour of our death could be now, but we generally think of it as the future. But those are really the two times that are most important, because the rest of the future we don't know. And really it's only now that we can really face God and know exactly what we're going to do. But we get caught up in these things. Oh, the next pope is going to be terrible. Our next bishop is going to be terrible. Our next pastor, my job is, all of these things that we imagine. Well, for many of them, they never come true, and we really are going to have to face something different. But we waste a lot of time, worrying about what we are sure is going to happen, but often never arrives. And so, if we do this without a well-formed reason to think things through, and in fact, you caution us, we ought not be doing this with an overtly rationalistic worldview or an overtly sentimental worldview. So being grounded in the present means being real and fully human and therefore attuned to God. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, people talk with the language that's sort of developed out of the Matrix movie about, being red-pilled, facing reality. Quite often people are embracing the black pill, ultimate doom, or they're embracing the white pill. These weren't really in the movie, but, people have developed this whole color scheme. Things are so rosy. And the reality is it's often a mix of all of these things. And we have to keep our heads and not give in to this sort of drama that overwhelms us, but instead be the kind of people when everybody else is running around with, being driven by every news bit, whether positive or negative or anything that we hear that's positive. We have to be the ones who actually are the still point in the storm. And we can only be that still point in the storm if we do achieve that silence within ourselves. It may not be possible if you're a father of many children or a mother of many children to ever achieve exterior silence, but you can achieve that silence of being recollected and remembering that God is with you. Mm-hmm. And the important question is not, why is this happening to me, or what's going to happen next, but what am I supposed to do, Lord, right now? What am I supposed to do? John Henry Newman's famous poem, which, many people sing as Lead Kindly Light, has that famous line, one step enough for me. I only ask to see one step ahead. And that's what we need to be thinking about.
Okay, so David, you're a person of high intellect, and I value your contributions greatly. And so as someone who appreciates thinking ahead, I think you can also resonate with the fact that that's a frustrating way to live sometimes.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't want to preclude the fact that we should sort of think through different scenarios and that sort of thing, but it's just that we have to remember that everything is pretty provisional when it comes to the future. Mm-hmm. And so we can't get too tied up in the ups or the downs and counting chickens before they've hatched. Because that's just the way to lead a life that is not concentrated and it is not focused and recollected. Mm-hmm. One of my former colleagues, Dr. Bob Kennedy at the University of St. Thomas in Minnesota, likes to say, make friends with drama, because that's what we have is drama. But when we're friends with it, we're not surprised by it. We're not overwhelmed by it. We're not panicky. But instead, we can say, hey, there are dramatic things going on, and I don't know what's going to happen in the next scene, but I know that right now I can be concentrated on what does the Lord want me to say, or what does the Lord want me to not say? What does the Lord want me to do or not do? And that's really the focus that I think we have to have.
We're running out of time in this segment, but I'm going to open this on this side so you can pick it up on the other side as well. we can safely say that Pope Francis's papacy was polarizing, to say the least. Either side had issues with him. But in the face of this, now we have Pope Leo's pontificate. And so the people are viewing this with a lens that's been colored by the Francis papacy. I just want to invite your insight into this.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I think Pope Francis's papacy was polarizing, and it was difficult for most people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think many people are sort of, fixated on whether he will leave behind Francis's papacy or whether he'll keep Francis's legacy. And I think there's going to be a mixture of both. I think Pope Leo he's not a perfect man, but I think thus far, he has been working very hard to show that he's actually being thoughtful about what we keep. He's being the wise steward of the Gospels, right? Figuring out what you leave behind, and what you pull out that maybe was left previously. And I think that's a good thing.
My guest is David Deavel, Associate Professor of Theology at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas, and Senior Contributor at the Imaginative Conservative. We're talking about facing the future with hard heads and soft hearts. Stay tuned. I'm Marcus Peter.
St. Therese once told her sister Celine that when we trust ourselves and not God, our soul becomes barren and incapable of virtue. Her remedy? External works of charity. We all try to do it on our own sometimes without asking for God's help. At St. Paul Evangelization, we suggest sharing the gospel with someone who needs it. Check out streetevangelization.com to find a team near you where you can share the love of Jesus. If there isn't one in your area yet, perhaps God is calling you to start a team in your city. To learn more, visit streetevangelization.com.
Ave Maria in the Afternoon is underwritten by the following nonprofit organization: Real Estate for Life. Buying or selling your home or business property? Real Estate for Life can connect you with one of 1,400 pro-life real estate agents around the world. When Real Estate for Life receives a referral fee, they donate 70% to Ave Maria Radio and Human Life International. More information at realestateforlife.org or 877-LIFE-US1. That's realestateforlife.org.
The following program is brought to you in part by MyCatholicWill.com. Surveys show that more than half of Americans do not have a will. At MyCatholicWill.com, it takes as little as 15 minutes to write your will and secure a legacy of faith. MyCatholicWill.com is the exclusive online destination for creating a Catholic will. The process of writing a will is simple and now more accessible than ever. MyCatholicWill.com, a legacy of faith for those you love.
When the need for senior care arises, home is where the heart is. Visiting Angels provides home care for mom or dad up to 24 hours per day, including personal care, meals, and light housework. You may select your professional caregiver with Visiting Angels. More information at visitingangels.com or at 877-374-LIVE. That's 877-374-LIVE. Visiting Angels, America's choice in senior home care.
Living the Beatitudes with Father Bjorn.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Saint Josemaria Escriva says that we are called to light up the pathways of this earth by being sowers of peace and joy. This comes from being aware that we are sons and daughters of God. On the road of life, though, we find dangers, but God walks with us every step of our life, pouring out the gifts of His Holy Spirit upon us. Our Lady is our companion, like GPS in our car, connected to the cloud and bringing the latest updates to help us navigate our journey and get out of traffic on the way to the eternal kingdom. We don't want to get into family fights on our way to God's vacation destination, but we should be these sowers of peace and joy. We shouldn't accept substitutes, accept only the authentic identity of being His children, His sons and daughters. Let's grow in happiness and bring peace to those around us. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.
For more about the Beatitudes, visit EWTNRC.com.
Where is prayer revealed in the Bible? The Catholic Catechism says it comes between the fall and the restoration of man, between God's sorrowful call to our first parents, "Where are you? What have you done?" and the coming of His only Son into the world. "Lo, I have come to do your will," says the Lord. Prayer is intertwined with human history. Beginning with Abraham, the Catechism asserts, prayer is first revealed in the Old Testament. God calls Abraham in old age to leave Haran and travel to the land of Canaan, and Abraham, in faith, leaves the land of his ancestors. Then Abraham extends generous hospitality during a remarkable encounter with God, which foreshadows the annunciation of Christ, the Son of the promise. Finally, Abraham offers his only son Isaac in sacrifice, and God, who will not spare his only son, spares Abraham's. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Good afternoon and welcome back. I'm Marcus Peter. I'm speaking with Dr. David Deavel, Associate Professor of Theology at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. David, I want to pick up where we left off. So we were just beginning to talk about the papacy of Pope Leo XIV and what are some of the things we're already seeing, because like you've rightly been paving the groundwork for us, overtly anticipating or dreading the future will only rob us of peace and most of all rob our sights from being trained on God.
Yeah, I think that's right, and that includes the papacy. I think the modern era has focused on the papacy, perhaps in an over exaggerated way. That our hopes are sort of fixated upon, what will this next pope do? What will happen? And the reality is that popes are very important, bishops are very important, all of our leaders are very important, but we can't get too excited about each and every move that a pope makes. But I think it's good to sort of look with clear eyes and say, well, Pope Leo said some pretty good things here. Some of these things maybe were not great. Pope Leo has made some good appointments. He's made some not so good appointments. But it's good to see this clearly and say, well, you know what? And if he does, I still have a task to do where I am. And most of the time, what we see in the news, the people who focus on ecclesial news and ecclesial gossip, that stuff is important in a way, but it doesn't change the fact that I have a task to do with my children, with my students, with my parish, and that's what I think we have to keep our eyes on.
Considering that, David, I want to ask your wisdom here. We're living in this, overt proliferation of information, especially through first the digital sphere. Now you've got the artificial intelligence sphere. I want to ask you to comment on what is perceived to be a kind of cultural ultramontanism. So it's not like everyone is faithful to Catholic doctrine, but for some reason there's an overtly exaggerated influence that every word or deed that the Pope does or says upon the average human person today. Yeah,
I think that's right. There is a tendency to think that everything that the Pope says is of absolute importance, and that's just not what the Church teaches. This is a lot of people think, well, this is just sort of a dorky theological distinction. When people say to me, well, you guys think that the Pope is infallible, I would say, no. The Pope is not infallible. The Pope is capable of teaching under certain circumstances infallibly.
Right.
And that's a very important distinction, because when you say the Pope is infallible, it's as if, he's never going to, choose the wrong lotto number, or will never get any answers wrong. And that's just not what we think. We do value him as a pastor, and we should approach his teachings and his homilies and everything else with a sort of respect that is due him. But we also are not going to have to expect, and it's not fair to him as a man to expect a kind of perfection that is not promised and is not there, because that sells the faith on other people in the wrong way too.
Yeah.
We're not providing a fantasy. We're saying that no, the Lord provides at certain particular moments. The Pope shares in this, but otherwise, he is our pastor. We need to pray for him. We need to pray for him and our bishop and our priests. And those who have authority over us, without indulging in the false belief that they, and particularly a pope, will always get everything right and always be, practically perfect in every way, as the Mary Poppins musical has it about her.
Okay, so considering that, I think, therefore, that opens a conversation to the flip side, which is that entire cohort who looks to the Pope with a superimposed ideological lens that waits to see if this Pope will finally take the church out of the Dark Ages and into modernity and change doctrine. Just comment on that, please.
Yeah, I think that's, we could talk about other kinds of things. Many people have these expectations. Well, this Pope will finally restore tradition, capital T, in the way that I want. This Pope will finally get rid of capital T tradition in the way that I want.
Right.
I think both are distorted. The sort of the more traditionalist version is less of a distortion because it's coming out of a real desire to have the fullness of what the church possesses. But this idea that that Pope Leo or Pope Francis or any other pope is supposed to sort of deliver us from everything that was bad behind us is really a problem. And this is something that Pope Benedict, when he was still a Cardinal Ratzinger, used to talk about with regard to those who sort of called themselves the Spirit of Vatican II crowd, that they wanted to turn their version of Vatican II into a kind of super dogma that initiated a new beginning in the church. But the church doesn't do that kind of paradigm change, that kind of, now we've turned the corner and we can forget all that. Now, the church travels through history, like that good steward of Christ's parable, right? Constantly keeping the old things, bringing out new things sometimes, but sometimes bringing out old things and putting it all together so that the church can be faithful. And that's what we should want, is not a pope who leaves behind things, but a pope who carries it all together and figures out in a good way what is needed now from that great tradition.
And conversely, or at least I should say flowing from that, it is the onus of the baptized to do the work, to study and to be knowledgeable of what magisterial tradition upholds and teaches, so that we ourselves are not led astray, but we also know how to think rightly about the statements, the writings, and the teachings of the Pope.
Yeah, I think there is a certain tendency that many people have had within the church over probably the course of the entire history of the church, right? But particularly in the last few centuries, there have been a certain percentage of the population in the pews who've thought, well, you know what? That stuff is priest stuff, or that stuff belongs to the religious. Well, certain things certainly do belong to the priests and the deacons, and some things belong to the monks and the nuns. But the care for the entire church belongs to every single person.
Right.
And we have to be filled with the Spirit, and we have to let that Spirit shape us so that we can learn properly what the church teaches, and we can also help discern what the church needs in particular situations. There's a marvelous image in St. Ignatius of Antioch's letters in the first century, where he talks about the church as a kind of orchestra, and the bishop is meant to be a kind of conductor who makes all of the sounds harmonize together. And of course, the Pope is the bishop who tries to help all of the bishops themselves harmonize together. But that doesn't mean that the bishop does everything in the orchestra, doesn't sing this, we all have to take that part.
Exactly. If everyone's a conductor, then the church has no purpose. But at the same time, without a conductor. So, considering that, like you rightly note, the church isn't going to tell us whether cloth or cloth versus paper diapers, which one's better. But it will provide us the moral precepts necessary for us to navigate these prudential judgment questions.
That's right. I mean, there have been some people lately who've been very upset because some of the U.S. bishops have said, look, we don't want to really comment on every particular issue of the moment. And I think there's a wisdom to that trying to make prudential judgments about complicated policy decisions really isn't something that the bishops or even the Pope they're not given any special wisdom on that. Now, some of them are probably pretty good, and for those, we'd love to hear from them. But the idea that the bishop's job is to sort of give us directions on everything on these matters is a problem, because that if you read the letter of Vatican II, that's the job of the laity, who in their particular spheres are supposed to take that teaching and those principles that the church gives us and try to apply them sensibly. And again, doesn't mean that the laity are going to be infallible either, but it is their particular task. And the bishops are there to sort of give those principles out and to be kind of like a coach, right? I've taught you how to play, now go out there and play. And then we have to not shirk our duty to actually play the game as we are called to do it in the particular position we're in.
And thereby, when we consider that you're calling us to have hard heads, this language of hard heads, really what you're calling for is what the church has always called for, that if this is the responsibility of the laity, our intellects must be well formed so that we can be unyielding in the face of truth.
That's right. We have to have those principles down that the church teaches about morality. We have to have that knowledge of where we're headed, and it has to be in there. And we have to say, no, I cannot skimp on truth. I cannot edge around truth. I cannot push truth to the side. I always have to be absolutely certain on those things. That's what we have to be hard-headed about. But then in that application, we have to be very sensitive. We have to have those soft hearts that see that, you know what, these are the principles, and people should be living by them, and we should be able to make this thing work. But we also have to deal with the fact that people are fallen and they're hurting, and we have to try to minister to them. We have to try to make everything work together in a world that is not perfect yet. Because that's what the Lord did too. He worked with people who had, he said if they had the faith of a mustard seed, they could move mountains. And many people have probably not even that much faith, but we have to work with them and not sort of crush them.
David, real joy to connect with you as always. Thank you for making the time.
Hey, glad to talk to you, Marcus. God bless.
My guest has been Dr. David Deavel, Associate Professor of Theology at the University of St. Thomas in Houston, Texas. He authored this article, Facing the Future with Hard Heads and Soft Hearts, and he's calling for us to be students of the truth of the church while having hearts open to seeing how the Holy Spirit guides each of us. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marcus Peter.